Coming up, how the election is changing as the masks come off both Trump and Harris. I'll reveal how Fani, Willis, and Nathan Wade have been conspiring with the Biden administration to get Trump. And author Jack Posobiec, he's editor of Human Events. He joins me. We're going to talk about news of the day. Also, his new book, Bulletproof, the truth about the assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
It's a little hard to believe, guys, but it's 2 weeks to Election Day. And as you know, early voting is underway in a bunch of places. My recommendation is that if you can, go out and vote early. Debbie said she's going to vote today, I think, right, honey? Or tomorrow? Today or tomorrow? I'm going to have a little travel coming up, so I'm going to vote this weekend. So what we're doing is we're helping the team by putting our votes in the bag. This way the campaigns can focus on getting other voters, focusing on the undecided voters. So that's worth keeping in mind. I'm happy to say Vindicating Trump is also now up on Amazon. You can get DVDs through Amazon as well as on the website. They're available through Salem Now, and Salem Now can get them to you very quickly. Vindicatingtrump.com is the website. The book is also, of course, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also through the website. Debbie and I were talking on the way to the podcast about how it's looking, how the race is looking, and you might know that we have a little bit of a bet going. Now, this is a meaningless bet. This is not like one of those bets on Polymarket because we're wagering money, but Debbie goes, she goes, Dinesh, if you win, money's going to go from our checking account to I'll write you a check, and it's basically going to come out of our checking account and go back into our checking account. And quite frankly, if Debbie wins, it's going to be sort of the same thing. So this is really a bet. It's the money is symbolic. Well, really, it's kind of a bet as to who's calling this right. Now, it turns out that we kind of agree that the momentum is with Trump. I think Debbie also agrees that she thinks Trump is going to get more electoral votes, but she's worried about the shenanigans. She's worried about the fraud. She's also worried about last-minute twists and turns, media-generated or orchestrated scandals, all this kind of bogus stuff that the bad guys are known for and are actually very good at. To quote Trump himself from the movie, they're very good at cheating. Trump says this is all they're good at. Kind of a good point, right? They don't know how to govern. They can't protect our borders. They can't protect our shores and foreign policy. They are horrible for the economy, but they monomaniacally invest their energies in how to win. I put win here in quote marks, elections. Now, in trying to think about the election, there are two kinds of bias that are worth pointing out. And Debbie and I are quite aware of it. Debbie acknowledges her bias. And her bias is, you could almost call it PTSD bias, or the bias that comes from not wanting to be disappointed. You notice that this is a psychology that people have in normal life. Let's just say, for example, you meet a girl or you meet a guy and you're like, I'm gonna expect the worst because I don't really want, if things don't work out, I don't want to be taking a heavy blow psychologically. So I'll act like nothing good is gonna come of this. So if it does, I'll be pleasantly surprised. And this is very much the Deborah D'Souza psychology. But it's worth noting that there's the opposite of that. And we were thinking back to the Romney campaign, and Debbie's like, yeah, everybody in our Republican club then. And by the way, I didn't know Debbie at this time, but she's like, everybody was saying Romney is going to win. And I'm like, yeah, but Romney was always a dud. It's not that Romney has become a dud and he was this dynamic guy. He was always a dud. And Debbie goes, I know, but people were excited about Romney. And I go, well, that's the opposite type of bias. Let's call it wishful thinking bias. And wishful thinking bias is confusing what is going to be the case with what you want to be the case. This is the wishful thinking is, you can almost call it the billiard ball phenomenon. You hit the ball and you're like, go to the hole. You've already made your shot. The ball is either going to go in or it's not going to go in. But you somehow think that your cheerleading from the side of the game is going to make it happen. No, it's not. That's wishful thinking. All right. Now, all that being said, I think it is true that the masks are coming off in both sides. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, what happens with candidates is that they get externally defined, very often initially by the media. Now, you and I may not buy into these definitions, but you got to remember that for the undecided voters who are making up their minds just right about now, believe it or not, you're like, man, these people must be super dumb. They must have no idea what's going on. And this is all unfortunately true. But I hate to tell you, these are the people who are probably going to decide the outcome of the 2024 election. You can call it an indictment of democracy if you want, but that's kind of the way it is. Now, for these people, they have been subjected not really to Trump and not even really to Harris, but to the masked Trump and the masked Harris. And what I mean by this is that the media, the mainstream media, has invented a cartoonish negative portrait of Trump. That's the Trump mask. And what is the Trump mask? Trump is wearing like this Halloween mask of being like an ogre. He's horrible. He's a racist. He's this, he's that. He's a dictator. So this is the Trump mask, and they have foisted it on him, and they read all events through the lens of that mask. So it's kind of like if there was a monster in the room, and let's say the monster did something really harmless, like sit down and start eating some macaroni and cheese. You'd be like, that's really disgusting. The monster is eating macaroni and cheese, just getting ready to eat you and eat me. So in other words, you interpret even benign data in the light of this monster theory. And that's basically how they've been reading Trump. Trump goes to McDonald's. Oh no, it's disgusting. It's a stunt. It's insidious. He's trying to conceal his true character. This is the Trump mask. But what's happening is the Trump mask is falling off, because for the ordinary guy, they just see Trump, and they see Trump kind of in his own zone. Here's what I mean. Trump goes to McDonald's, but if a typical politician goes to McDonald's, they would sort of dress the part. They're like, listen, you gotta put on a hoodie. You gotta sort of look like you're one of them. Trump doesn't do this. He looks like Trump. He's all dressed up. He's wearing his red tie. So you have a billionaire in a suit, but he's serving fries at McDonald's. And the important thing about it is his interaction. Look at the 20-something guy who's actually teaching him how to make fries. And Trump is attentively listening. He's like curious about how these fries are made. And his interactions with people through the door. Again, the left is like, well, this is all a stunt. This is all staged, Dinesh. And I'm like, staged? You mean Trump doesn't really work at McDonald's? It's staged? Really? Are you saying he needs permission from the manager at McDonald's to like run for president? Is he gonna have to put off his campaign because the manager won't let him do it because he's on the clock? No, of course it's staged, but my point is within the stagecraft. If Kamala Harris staged the event, she'd actually have a teleprompter in McDonald's to tell her how to interact with people. Whereas Trump is so natural about it. At one point, the Indian guy just gets over enthusiastic, the guy in the car, and he goes, I'm just an ordinary person. And Trump goes, you're not an ordinary person. In other words, Trump is reflecting that kind of social equality, the way he deals with people very much on a person-to-person level. So the Trump mask, scary Trump, is falling off. Now, there's also a Kamala mask, and the Kamala mask is the opposite. Let's call it the Cinderella mask. Kamala is Cinderella. Kamala is this marvelous, she's transformed. She's actually, don't believe the cackling idiot that you see and you've seen in the past, because she's actually brilliant. She's actually a voice of the future. She wants to turn the page. So this is the manufactured Kamala that they're giving us. But the problem with that is the real Kamala breaks through. I think a classic moment was when Kamala Harris was at the rally and somebody shouts, actually a bunch of people shout, "Jesus is Lord," and she instinctively responds. The key thing is this was an instinctive, unrehearsed response. And it's, what did she say? "You're at the wrong rally." So what she's doing is she is admitting that really devout Christians, people who really believe Jesus is Lord, don't belong at her rally. Now, why not? That's because in the Democratic camp, you may say the state is Lord. The regime is Lord. And so she's like, go to the other rally. And she's giving a message to Christians across the country. You don't belong with us, you belong with them. I think this is especially important for the wavering Christians who are like, I don't know if I can bring myself to vote for Trump. Well, let's remember that the camp that doesn't want you is the camp that is the Democrats. The Democrats are on the anti-God side. So if you want to be anti-God, then you got to go with Trump. There's no other real alternative. And I think this is the key point. In a democracy, we're choosing among alternatives, and there's no way to avoid ultimate responsibility, is there? Here's why. If you live in a monarchical society or an aristocratic society, you can say, well, listen, my rulers are horrible, but I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't choose them. It's the king's son. He just happens to be an idiot. Or this just happens to be the Dauphin, and he's the next in line. But in a democratic society, you're given a vote. You have a ballot, and you get to participate. And so you have three choices. You vote over here, you vote over there, or you don't vote. And not voting is, in a sense, complicity in the outcome as it is, because you're not casting your lot to tilt the scales this way or that way. So you're going to be responsible either way. There's no way to be, you might be trying to be without acknowledging it. Pontius Pilate, I wash my hands off the matter. No, Pontius Pilate was not in fact innocent. He was not in fact neutral. He had the power to say this trial is not going to go forward. He chose not to exercise that power. That's why we blame him to this day, because he is an enabler. And so are you if you take the position that, oh, I'm not going to participate. I'm too good for this. That's actually an appalling abrogation of responsibility. The mask has come off both sides, and it's time for you to pick a side. We are officially in that time of the year where eating becomes way off balanced. Parties, holidays, family gatherings, they always mean more snacks, more sweets, generally indulging in all the wrong foods. And when your eating habits get off balance, so can you. That's why I strongly recommend Balance of Nature daily supplements. Here's what we're talking about. Fruits and veggies in a capsule. These fruit and veggie supplements are sourced from whole fruit and vegetable ingredients, all the things you may be missing, all the things you need to make up for being off balance during the eating season. So make sure you're getting more of a variety of fruit and vegetable ingredients every step of the way with Balance of Nature. Start a trend toward better health today with my special startup offer. Whether you order online or call direct, you got to use promo code AMERICA. You'll get 35% off plus free shipping and a money-back guarantee. Here's the number to call, 800-246-8751. Again, 800-246-8751, or you can go to balanceofnature.com. When you use discount code AMERICA, you get it all, 35% off, free shipping, and a money-back guarantee. The radical left is at it again. They're working overtime to gain control of the Supreme Court. They want to end lifetime tenure. They want to end the court's conservative majority. And this is bad news wherever it happens. Remember when Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, he reformed, really controlled Venezuela's court. Debbie and I have had this discussion many times, and she's warned once Chavez got the court, he used it to destroy Venezuela. He never lost a ruling or an election. And packing the court ensured Venezuela would never again be a free and capitalist country. So now, more than a decade after his death, Venezuela is still in tyranny and in chaos. Well, we can't let that happen here. If we lose the court, quite frankly, we lose the country. And this is why my friends at First Liberty are fighting to save the court. And you can help them. To win the fight, they need 1 million patriots like you to join them. How do you do that? Learn more at supremecoup.com/Dinesh. Again, it's Supreme, C-O-U-P, supremecoup.com/Dinesh. There's an interesting new development involving, I was about to say Fani Willis, but Debbie reminds me it's not Fani, it's Fani. Fani Willis. And what we're learning, this is courtesy of the House Oversight Committee, that Fani Willis dispatched her dumb, unqualified boyfriend, Nathan Wade, her overpaid paramour, who got something around $700,000 in taxpayer money, including, as it turns out, $250 per hour for 2 meetings lasting 16 hours, so 8 hours a day, supposedly. Now, I'm not sure if the actual meeting occurred 8 hours or if he padded his timesheet. Yeah, I met for 8 hours. Probably he didn't, but this is basically how government operatives are. They have a meeting and they count it as I was working all day. But this is not the key point. The key point is that Nathan Wade was meeting very early on with multiple White House prosecutors and White House staff about the indictments that they were going to bring against Trump. Now, for a long time, the Biden administration and Harris have been saying, oh no, Trump must be a habitual criminal. There is no coordinated effort to get him. There are multiple cases brought about independently in multiple jurisdictions. We're not coordinating with Alvin Bragg or Letitia James or Fani Willis. Well, as it turns out, they were and they have been. And the details of this are now coming out piece by piece. And all of it gives a lot of clarity to how this has come about. Because think about it. If you think about Trump, here you have a guy, and he lives 76 years of his life, no criminal indictments, no charges. And Trump is in the real estate environment of New York. It's a wheeler-dealer environment. He's probably dealing with some unsavory characters, some suspect lawyers, all kinds of deal makers, probably unions. So the probability of engaging in unlawful behavior, probably in that world, pretty high. And yet, no criminal charges at all. Then, in the year that Trump is running again for president, 91 criminal charges. So that's prima facie, on the face of it, a little bit dubious. And now we find out that in the Georgia case, they were cooking this indictment together with the White House. And Nathan Wade was the guy, he was the man who was dispatched to figure it out. Now, the Oversight Committee brings in Nathan Wade, and he fesses up that he has had these meetings with White House counsel. But when they asked him what happened in those meetings, his answer to question after question after question, I don't remember. He doesn't remember a thing. He remembers that he was there. He remembers that he billed for it. Now, even here, the reason he, quote, remembers is there's documentation showing that it happened. So he can't really get out of it. He has to admit it. But as for the meeting itself, he says that even though the meeting lasted 8 hours, he just couldn't remember what was talked about at all. He says he couldn't remember any details. He couldn't remember who scheduled the meeting. He couldn't remember exactly who was there. He couldn't remember what the meeting was about, and he couldn't remember what people said at the meeting. So this is a very convenient amnesia on the part of Nathan Wade. But however much he tries to deny the content of it, you don't actually have to know the content of it to know what the purpose of the meeting was. The purpose of the meeting was, how do we get Trump? And how can we in the White House help you achieve our purpose as much as yours of putting this guy out of the race, putting this guy behind bars if we have to? All of this is what that meeting was all about. So collusion is going on, and is going on in a very explicit way. Sometimes when you're dealing with the left, the collusion is of a more wink-wink nature. You think, for example, about multiple media sources not covering the Hunter Biden story. They don't necessarily need to talk about it. Now, as it turns out, press people do talk a lot. They do have Zoom calls. There is a sort of group of influential reporters who get on a weekly powwow with each other to share information. You better pursue this. And by the way, these are all guys and gals on the political left. So I'm not implying that there is no open communication, but I'm saying there doesn't really need to be. You can have a journalist at the Sacramento Bee, another one at the Seattle Times, a third one at the Dallas News, the Dallas Morning News. They don't necessarily need to communicate. They all know we don't want to put out information on the Hunter Biden story because that's going to hurt Joe Biden, the guy exactly that we're trying to help across the finish line. So at some time we think, okay, well, you've got these leftist DAs in New York, in Manhattan, that's Alvin Bragg. The leftist governor of New York, that's Kathy Hochul. The attorney general of New York, that's Letitia James. Then you've got the Fulton County prosecutor, that's Fani Willis. And all these people are on the same side. So they're trying to get Trump because they all don't like Trump. But now we're seeing that it's more than that. It isn't just that they're all on the same side. Yes, they are. But there is, in fact, an orchestrated strategy. And the strategy is very deceptive because I think the Biden people know if, let's say, they brought 91 charges all from the Biden DOJ, it would be rather obvious. It would be a little Putinesque, if I can use that term. It would be a little bit too obvious that we're dealing with banana republic tactics. Hey, the regime is trying to lock up the leader of the opposition party. And don't get me wrong, they are trying to do that. That's the point of Jack Smith's case in Florida. That's the point of Jack Smith's case in DC. But in addition to that, they're like, listen, let's pile on. Let's bring in New York. Let's bring in Georgia. And also, this is a way of fooling the public, right? Because if you have local prosecutors who are pushing the same thing, then to the guy who's not paying close attention, it's kind of like your neighbor. If your neighbor is facing a criminal charge in one place and your neighbor goes, I didn't do it, I'm being framed. You're like, well, maybe that's the case. But let's say the guy is facing a federal charge and then a state charge, and then you know that he's also wanted for something in another state. You go, oh, wait a minute. Because there are multiple charges in multiple jurisdictions and the probability of all these people being in cahoots with each other is very low, therefore, this guy probably is a bad guy. What is the chance that he would be facing all this stuff if he didn't do it, or at least do most of it, or at least do something? And I think that's what the left has been going for with Trump. They want Trump to be found guilty in the court of public opinion, which is to say among the jurors who ultimately count the voters. Because after all, the verdict that they're looking for isn't even necessarily the one that comes in a Manhattan or in a Georgia courtroom. It's the verdict that they want to win 2 weeks from today on November 5th. Can you imagine your child being lost alone in the woods for 9 days? There's a new movie. It's called Lost on a Mountain in Maine. It's produced by Sylvester Stallone. It's the inspiring true story of 12-year-old Don Fendler, separated from his family in a fast-moving storm and lost in the remote wilderness of northern Maine. For 9 days, he fights to stay alive with no food, no proper clothing. He didn't even know the danger he was in. Hey, as a parent, this would be one of my worst nightmares. His disappearance captures national headlines, sparking a massive search effort with hundreds of volunteers, including his own father, who was afraid he'd never see his son again. Don't miss this inspirational family adventure film of the year, Lost on a Mountain in Maine, from Blue Fox Entertainment. It's coming to theaters nationwide on November 1st. Get tickets online at lostOnAMountainInMaineMovie.com. That's lostOnAMountainInMaineMovie.com. Mike Lindell is such a great guy. He's got a heart of gold. Mike and MyPillow love giving back to those in need. They sent a truckload of 14,000 MyPillows to those impacted by Hurricane Helene. But even though he loves to give back, a large retail store just canceled a huge order that had already left the warehouse. And so, besides giving to those in need, Mike is like, okay, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. And for the first time ever, you can get a standard classic MyPillow for wholesale prices, just $14.88. Wow. But it gets better. For a limited time, they're offering the entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Get queen size MyPillows, $18.88. Upgrade to a king for just $1 more. Get the body pillows for $29.88. Multi-use MyPillows, just $9.88. Here's the number to call, 800-876-0227, or you can go to mypillow.com. Use promo code Dinesh and take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever. On top of that, get free shipping on orders over $75. These prices have never been offered this low before. Call 800-876-0227 or go to mypillow.com. Use promo code Dinesh. Get the standard MyPillow, just $14.88, the lowest price ever. There are limited quantities at this price, and once they're gone, they're gone. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast Jack Posobiec. You know Jack, senior editor of Human Events. He does a podcast, which is the Human Events Daily with Jack Posobiec. He is also the author of a new book out today. Couldn't be more timely. It's called Bulletproof, The Truth About the Assassination Attempts on Donald Trump. Follow him on X at Jack Posobiec. Hey, Jack, welcome. Thanks for joining me. Let me just start by asking you broadly. There seems to be a sense that the momentum of the campaign is favoring Trump. I just saw a survey of Latino voters, and I was quite startled to see. I was expecting decent results for Trump, but the results were even better than I had hoped. Do you agree that there is a momentum shift underway? And how are you feeling about this election?
Well, Dinesh, thanks again so much for having me on today. And look, I just spent the entire weekend campaigning in Pennsylvania and then down in North Carolina. I was there pretty much all day Sunday at the Elon event in his town hall in Pittsburgh. And is there momentum? Sure, there's momentum. The McDonald's Philadelphia stop, of course, is just instantly iconic. But at the same time, I don't live in the world of momentum, and you can't measure and quantify vibes. And with my sort of political operative hat on, and I've been working politics for 20 years in Pennsylvania. I've seen campaigns for 20 years in the state of Pennsylvania where I'm from, and I've never seen anything like this. It is like a political civil war in a sense, a cold civil war, obviously, but there is so much money, Dinesh, that's being dumped into this state. $500 million will be spent just in the state of Pennsylvania alone. And I have to look back at the data, but if I remember correctly, that's about how much was spent in 2008 by Obama and McCain in total for the entire country was $500 million. And there was huge press about it. Now we're seeing $500 million in just my home state of Pennsylvania. And so Kamala Harris messaging is everywhere. Her billboards are everywhere. They are up in all of the blue areas. And this thing is it's just becoming a political street fight. So that's why I've got my I voted sticker right here. And this is not stolen valor. I earned it the real way by going in to the polling place, which is actually in Pennsylvania. We have this thing now that's sort of de facto in-person early voting, because you can go to the county board of election, request a mail-in ballot, and we know we don't like those mules, so we decided you can turn it right back in at the county board of elections. So there's no mail, there's no drop box, there's no stamp, there's no postal workers that are involved. The chain of custody is me directly back to the county official, and I loved it. And believe it or not, I was even able to do that in a Pennsylvania county on a Sunday morning.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think the habits on our side are changing a little bit. At one point, the kind of official doctrine was hold off until election day. I think we all agree Debbie's going to actually go vote early today in Texas. I'm going to vote over the weekend. It's right. Good to bank your votes early, right? Because this way the campaign can then focus on undecided voters, direct its resources where they need to be directed. Now, one of the most, if I think of iconic images, you mentioned, of course, Trump at McDonald's, but if I were to put the top three from the campaign to date on the Trump side, it would be the assassination attempt with Trump pushing himself up with the Secret Service guys holding him down. Trump is basically mouthing, "Get me up," and then fight. Yes. Second, I would say probably the mug shot. Right. And then third, Trump in the overalls at the drive-thru at McDonald's. I mean, this has been some very memorable iconography leading into the campaign. Not surprisingly, the press has been greatly downplaying the two assassination attempts. I mean, first of all, you have these unprecedented, two attempts on the life of the Republican nominee and a former president, and they're pretending like it never happened. I think I know why, but you most certainly know why. So let's pivot to your book out today, Bulletproof. Talk a little bit about the significance of those two assassination attempts.
Well, thank you so much, Dinesh. And the book is out today, and we've already done a lot in pre-sales, and it looks like it's going to be pretty well done. And people said, how could you have a book that was written so quickly? How could you do this? And writing books takes time for sure. And I actually will just say that myself and my co-author Joshua Lysek, we actually started writing this book on July 13th. We didn't have a deal. We didn't have permission. We didn't have anything in the works, and we were blessed to get a deal as we were writing this. But when everything was going on that day, it sort of remembered 9/11, sort of recalled 9/11 for us. And at that time, both Joshua and myself were younger, and we were observers of 9/11. But this time we realized that we could do something. I've been blessed to have a platform now, and I can actually do something to affect this. I can give a voice to this, and it's going to be a lot of work, but I don't care, because I think it's important. I think it needs to be done, and more importantly, it needs to be done by the election. And I was going to tell people that even if I didn't have a book deal, I was just going to put this out before the election myself. That I would have just done it, because this needs to be out in people's hands before the election, so that they can take it to people and they could show it to them and say, hey, don't forget this happened. And it's actually a whodunit. It's actually a true crime, almost a novel in a sense, because we were going through those emotions, we were writing it down, we were asking the questions that everybody's asked, and we found a lot of answers as well. Some that are a lot darker than I think people realized or would want to realize, but at the same time, they're important because these are the answers and the truth that will actually expose the nature of the system under which we all live under today. Because one thing that we pull out in the book that has been completely also missing from the headlines and missing from the narrative. So you mentioned the McDonald's situation. So the media narrative and the Democrat narrative is, it's staged. It was made up, and the customers were staged, and it's, all this. I said, wait a minute, hold on a second. The Democrats' entire candidate is staged. No one voted for this person. She was installed as a candidate because there was a candidate that you voted for, and his name was Joe Biden. He's actually currently the sitting, at least legal, president of the United States. And you took him out in a political coup that took place just 9 days after Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. And we argue in the book that because that bullet did not achieve its intended mark on that day, the assassin's mark, that's what set in motion the events behind the scenes from the real people that control our nation to pull Joe Biden, essentially ending his presidency in the same time and installing Kamala Harris as this new nominee for their party. That decision was not made by Joe Biden. That decision was not made by Jill Biden. That was a decision made by the people that are actually in power in the United States.
And what are you saying, Jack, in the book? Are you saying that I agree with you completely, of course, that there's a secret junta running this country. We can probably guess at the names of who is in that elite group, but we don't, in fact, know. We also agree that Biden is sitting in the boat, but he's not steering the boat. And probably neither is Kamala Harris. But here's my question. Are you saying that these people orchestrated the assassination attempt in some way? Or are you saying that they were kind of hopeful that something like this would happen, and the moment that it failed, they were like, actually, we now need to do something about our guy. He's just not up to it. And so they made a decision post-Butler that Trump's reaction to the event showed Trump as stronger than ever. And they were like, we've got to swap out this, this dementia patient that we've been puppeteering all along and bring on somebody else so we can puppeteer in the same way.
Well, again, that these are all important questions for us to understand about the true nature of how our country works. And we do believe that we live under a regime. The closest answer that we're willing to go at this point, and we set up 3 scenarios in the book to kind of ask this question. We say, number 1, the official narrative, the lone gunman, just 20-year-old kid decides to climb a roof and do this. He's flying his drone. He's jumping around from rooftop to rooftop in broad daylight. He brings his rangefinder to check the specific range from the AGR building to the podium. He flies his drone to check where the Secret Service and the local law enforcement implements are from the Beaver County ESU and the Butler County ESU. And he is able to go up to this building. He even walks around. And we spoke throughout the course of the book, we spoke to multiple eyewitnesses who met him. Some eyewitnesses that I even know through organizations like Turning Point Action, or just friends I have who were there, like Bricksuit, who was sitting in the front row. And we then put out this, we just don't really feel that the lone wolf narrative holds water. Then the second narrative that comes up is this question of Iran, the Iranian state, and this individual, Ashraf Merchant, who was arrested just 2 days prior to the shooting. Now, he's arrested at a port of entry to the United States, not in Pennsylvania. It doesn't make it anywhere near Pennsylvania. And there are no connections whatsoever between Thomas Matthew Crooks and Iran. Although we leave the possibility out there that given these encrypted foreign email accounts that he supposedly had, that the FBI won't open, and President Trump has been demanding that they open, we don't leave out the possibility that he could have been in communication with people abroad. And most likely, I would say that the designs for the explosive devices that were found in his car would be the best potential vector for that. But at the same time, we've got some reporting that it could be that he just purchased these plans on the internet, on the dark web somewhere, and then was able to use that to build it. And keep in mind, these were not pipe bombs or pressure cooker bombs like we would see in the anarchist notebook days, anarchist cookbook, or the Tsarnaev brothers at the Boston bombing. These were very sophisticated. And they actually used ammo cans with liquid chemicals and had a remote detonator and could have detonated them. And then we saw that he didn't. But even Chris Wray, the FBI director, had to admit under oath that these things were live and that these things could have gone off. And so the final scenario is, was this an inside job?
And Jack, with that, let me have you pause for a moment, because let's come back, because I want you to then flesh out option number 3. We'll be right back with Jack Posobiec.
Of course.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing Share Right. It's healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. I'm back with Jack Posobiec, senior editor of Human Events. We're talking about his new book out today, Bulletproof: The Truth About the Assassination Attempts on Donald Trump. Jack, you went through scenario 1 and 2, and you were about to unfurl scenario 3, perhaps the most disturbing scenario of all, the possibility of an inside job at some level. Spell out what you think happened here with scenario 3.
Sure. So the closest that we come down on, based on the information that we have, based on the reporting that we have, and, I'll even just say that I don't trust the federal government. I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the Secret Service to give us the full information. Even the House report that just came out a couple of days ago shows that the FBI site lead for this was a woman who had only had 4 years out of FLETC, out of the Service Academy, going into the Secret Service. So clearly did not have the qualifications to be running a rally of this magnitude, an outdoor rally with someone who's potentially the most, most vulnerable or highest profile, I should say, politician in the entire world as Donald Trump, obviously in an outdoor rally, which is clearly the riskiest thing any politician of any, ideology or party can do, certainly since the events of Dealey Plaza in November 1963 with JFK. And so the idea that the agents that were given to this were all low level. The augments that they received were very low, only 3 augments. Dr. Joe Biden, who had an event in the same AOR down in Pittsburgh that evening, had 11 augmented Secret Service agents for that evening for an indoor restaurant. What President Trump was only given 3 for the outdoor rally, massive outdoor rally, thousands of people. It begs the question, was this some level of intentional neglect? And we identify throughout the book 12 independent security failures, of which any one would have prevented the shooting from happening. And so we actually went to, said, I'm not going to write this myself. I'm going to bring in the computer. So we went to GPT-4 Omni, which is the latest iteration from OpenAI, plugged in all of the 12 independent security failures. And we said, what are the odds that all of these failures would happen on the same day that a trained marksman with malicious intent to kill would arrive at the rally? Gave us the answer of 1 in 1 septillion, which is roughly the same odds as if you or I were to take a coin and toss it 93 times, and every single one of those 93 flips in a row came up heads. Now, Dinesh, if you or I tried that at a casino, they'd probably arrest us because they would know we're clearly using a trick coin of some sort. But then something even more disturbing happened, because we asked GPT-4 Omni, what is your assessment of this? And the answer that the computer gave us back was, given the extreme unlikelihood of a high probability such as this, it is more than likely that this occurrence did not happen by chance alone, and that perhaps something more is at stake. And so that's the computer's response. And people know that, GPT has a bit of a liberal bent to it, just based on what they feed it to learn. And so, look, the computer's saying that. We're saying it's very clear that he could not have done this unless he was on some level operating in an area where the intent was not to secure President Trump and the rally goers, like Corey Compatore, by the way, who lost his life. But at some level, the intent was to unsecure that rally. And given that reading, perhaps these were not failures, but perhaps this was, in fact, intent. And so if the intent was to leave him unsecured, then in fact, that intent was the goal that we see as being successful on that day. And then, by the way, just about 2 months later, down to September 15th in West Palm Beach, where an individual who was a Ukrainian foreign fighter, Ryan Wesley Routh, and we barely had time to get that into the book, but we did as much as we could. I actually had to, halt the presses a bit. And Dinesh, you've written a lot of books, and you know that's quite expensive to do. Actually, it's not as fun as in the movies to stop a printing while it's already being printed. But I said this is so important, we have to put it in. And this individual, Ryan Wesley Routh, was directly involved with the Ukrainian foreign fighters, and specifically a battalion called the Azov Battalion. That battalion is a neo-Nazi battalion. This is their ideology. And we know that they have received training over the years, and anyone can look this up in the New York Times, from the CIA, specifically involving assassinations that took place both in Ukraine of politicians that they believed were potential collaborators with the Russians, as well as across the border in Russia itself. So here we have, and I was able to identify Ryan Wesley Routh using a facial recognition search tool to search his image. And I was looking for social media posts or accounts where I could track him, that type of thing, which we did, of course, also find. But we end up finding this image of him in a propaganda video for this Azov battalion, which is something that I certainly did not have on my bingo card when I was looking into a potential Trump assassin. And so we see with that individual specifically, he had intent to be involved with foreign fighters, and he had written a dead man's letter from his self to his neighbor that he handed in and said, if anything happens to me, open this and give it to the FBI. And what it was released by the DOJ publicly, a letter saying that I was not able to complete this task, but someone else can. And if so, you will be rewarded $150,000. And Dinesh, we've seen the FBI redact documents for years. We've seen the entire government redact documents or file things under seal, and it requires people to file lawsuits and Freedom of Information Acts against them. But this letter, which includes a bounty on the head of Donald Trump, they released publicly. I've spoken to lawyers about this, criminal lawyers. They tell me there's no legal purpose that was made public. So the only purpose that I can see it serving is to spread this information that a bounty is out there. And by the way, ongoing and active on Donald Trump. And it's my belief, and that's why we've hired private investigators, because I don't trust the feds, that if we are able to dig into the truth of what happened in Butler, PA, and in West Palm Beach, then we can potentially find out a way to stop the current threats that are going on to Donald Trump and his family that are ongoing.
Wow, Jack. I mean, it looks like you have, in a way, elaborated and systematized something that I was fumbling toward intuitively, but without this kind of thorough research. I mean, I was thinking to myself after Butler, PA, that it doesn't make sense to think of this as a full-on conspiracy, because if the bad guys had decided we want to get rid of Trump, they're not going to hire a 20-year-old to go do it, right? They're going to probably be able to find a more competent team of assassins to carry it out. But intentional neglect is the phrase you used, and I think that's a very telling phrase, because even though we kind of expect government to be incompetent at some level, when the incompetence reaches a certain threshold, we go, no, that's way too much incompetence even for the government. So when I see, rotund, overweight Secret Service agents who don't know how to man their guns and are bouncing around Trump but not really blocking his body, I go, well, that's DEI. Right? But other things become much harder to explain. When people in a rally goes, there's a guy out there with a backpack and a gun, and they don't pull Trump immediately off the stage, I go, well, that seems to go beyond incompetence. You're actually notifying the authorities, and presumably they have instant communication with the people who are with Trump.
And what I would just point out is that, and we dig through the entire timeline on this, and of course, the Secret Service lied repeatedly to Congress, both Kim Cheadle, who is now the former head of the Secret Service, and Rod Rowe, who is the acting head, repeated lies under oath by the way, saying that we never knew that this individual was there. We never knew that there was a person who was there. But and that's just not true, because it's been borne out in my reporting and now reporting from the House that they knew for at least 27 minutes before the first shot that there was a suspicious person of interest that local law enforcement was attempting to track down. And keep in mind that if you go through the timeline here, President Trump had only been on stage for 11 minutes when the shots were fired. So he went on stage pretty much right at 6 p.m. that evening. That by 5:51 p.m., when the Secret Service has this information, all they would have to do is hit their, earpiece and say, hold the president backstage. Hold him backstage. And we've all been to rallies where the president is a couple of minutes late, hour and a half late. And I don't think anybody would have thought anything of it while they were dealing with a potential security threat. So the idea that they would allow him onto stage when it would have, at a moment's notice, been able to halt his progress and play a few more songs at the rally before we got Lee Greenwood come out there. It really does speak to the question of what was going on that day in Butler and why was President Trump allowed to walk out into what essentially became a kill box.
Also, Jack, as I put this in context, it seems to me that even if you think of something like what happened in January 6th of 2021, isn't it true that even there, the idea of intentional neglect could very well be the explanation of what happened there? Think about it. The barricades come down. The crowd behaves like any crowd. It pushes in the direction that the crowd is going. You have officers who either make way or in some cases are high-fiving the people going into the Capitol. To my knowledge, not once during that entire day did anyone get on a bullhorn and say, listen, everybody evacuate the building. You're not authorized to be here. That's the dog that never barked. Right. And so it appears like if you want people to come inside the Capitol, setting a kind of trap for them, you don't have to actually drive the crowd to the Capitol. The crowd is going to migrate in that direction. That's where their complaints are. All you have to do is a little bit of intentional neglect in letting people get past the barricades and get through the doors.
That's right. And I would also add, by the way, that at that same time, you mentioned the barricades coming down, that almost, and credit to my good friend Darren Beatty over at Revolver for putting this all together, that at the moment when, and we do actually reflect on this a little bit in the book because we compare the two situations as you just did, that the moment the barricades come down is the exact same moment that the second pipe bomb is called in by an anonymous report at the DNC. And something that, and talk about a dog not barking, Kamala Harris never brings this up, never talks about it when anyone even asks her. She changes the question very abruptly, changes the subject, because it was Secret Service because she had Secret Service protection as the vice presidential nominee that day. They were, or I guess the vice president-elect that day, that the Secret Service was manning her at the DNC. They had the report about the pipe bomb, and they were the ones that it was called into. And yet we never hear Kamala Harris ever talk about the fact that, oh, I was near a pipe bomb or a pipe bomb almost took me out or anything like this. But let's say you wanted to create, as part of this intentional neglect, a distraction in order to split the forces away from Capitol and redirect them to an area. And keep in mind, the DNC, for people who haven't been to the Capitol, it's just a few blocks away from the Capitol building proper. And so it falls within the zone of Capitol Hill, which is essentially controlled by the Capitol Police. And so when that happened, a dispatch of Capitol Police troops or forces or officers were sent over. You got a military guy, all right? I'm putting this into law enforcement terms, but they're then dispatched to the DNC headquarters to try to find out what's going on over there. And this happens at the same time that the Trump supporters, with no idea what's going on, are marching up towards the Capitol. And yet, for some reason, Kamala Harris never talks about this. There's no media narrative that she was almost killed on January 6th. There's certainly lots of narratives about January 6th, yet conspicuously, the dog that's not barking is that nobody talks about Kamala Harris potentially being threatened. Why is that?
Guys, this is not the kind of stuff you're going to get from the mainstream media, but you will get it from Jack Posobiec. Check out the book. It's Bulletproof, The Truth About the Assassination Attempts on Donald Trump. Jack, you have a busy day ahead. Thank you very much for joining me.
God bless you. Thanks so much, Dinesh.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.